The colony of Haven 12 had always been considered safe, almost forgotten by the larger human worlds. It was a place where families lived among rolling fields. Scientists experimented in high-tech labs, and children ran freely beneath artificial suns. The air was clean, the nights were calm, and the people who lived there believed their lives were far from danger. They believed they were isolated enough, protected enough, that no one would ever find a reason to come after them. But that belief, fragile and comforting as it was, would shatter in a single moment. It started with something small, almost dismissible at first. A faint blip on one of the colony's monitoring satellites, a shadow passing in the outer lanes of space. The control room operators exchanged casual glances. Probably just a stray cargo shuttle, one said, pressing buttons to continue. Scanning. Another shrugged. Could be a weather anomaly in the sensors. Nothing to worry about. For the people on Haven 12, their routines went on. Children went to school. Farmers checked soil reports. Engineers calibrated their machines. Life seemed ordinary, peaceful and safe. But the blip grew into something more. Signals became stronger, faster, and more deliberate. Suddenly, multiple, unidentified vessels appeared on the outer perimeter. They moved in perfect formation, unlike anything humans had ever seen. The operators panicked and sent urgent messages to the United Terran Council. But space is vast, and even light speed. Communication carries delay. By the time the warnings reached Earth and the nearby colonies, Haven 12's orbit was already encircled by the alien fleet. Inside the colony, the first signs of alarm were subtle. Sirens, soft at first, wailed through the streets. Public announcement. Systems urged calm, but the people could see the shapes on their screens, larger than any ship they had built. It was like watching shadows of giants appear at the edge of a calm lake. Panic started to ripple through the streets as the vessels came closer, forming a blockade that blocked every exit from Haven 12. Colonists ran to family shelters, grabbing whatever essentials they could carry. Scientists locked down their labs, preserving samples and research, while trying to maintain communication with Central Command. Children huddled with parents in wide-eyed fear, unable to fully understand why strangers from the sky wanted to destroy their home. Families held hands, whispered prayers, and tried to reassure each other. No one wanted to believe the disaster was real, but deep down, they knew it was. Then the attack began. It was swift and merciless. Weapons of unknown energy tore through the colony's outer defenses. Communication towers exploded, scattering signals like broken glass. Buildings collapsed under precise strikes, as if the alien fleet had studied every detail of Haven 12 before arriving. The people of the colony had no time to prepare, no time to hide. Even the most hardened security officers were thrown off balance, struggling to respond to an enemy whose technology seemed beyond imagination. The sky was filled with fire and smoke as the first wave of destruction hit. Families ran through crumbling streets, carrying children over debris, ducking under falling structures, desperately trying to reach emergency shelters. The air reeked of burning metal and synthetic materials. Panic and confusion mixed with grief as the first fatalities were confirmed. Mothers and fathers screamed as homes that had held decades of memories vanished in moments. The horror was immediate and total. In the colony's command center, a small team worked frantically to maintain a record of the events. Cameras captured the chaos on the streets, recording families running, shelters being destroyed, and people attempting to save one another. Even as the control team tried to evacuate civilians via the remaining shuttles, the alien ships targeted escape routes. The scene was almost cinematic, like a nightmare played in real time. But every person experiencing it was painfully aware it was their life, their home, and their family. Meanwhile, across human space, the first distress signals were received. The United Terran Council, based on the images coming in from Haven 12, quickly recognized the scale of the attack. Members of the Council convened emergency sessions, their faces grim as they watched streams of data showing entire sections of the colony disappearing. Commands were sent to nearby fleets, but the distance was too great. By the time human reinforcements could arrive, Haven 12 would already be a graveyard dot back in the colony. Despair settled over the streets like a heavy fog. Survivors huddled together in whatever remnants of buildings remained. Some prayed, some cried, and some refused to stop moving, carrying whatever supplies they could to the shelters that were still standing. Children clutched small toys or blankets, looking to adults for answers that could not be given. The sky above was streaked with explosions, a constant reminder that the threat was relentless. Even in the darkest moments, acts of bravery shone through. Security officers guided panicked civilians toward escape pods. Scientists manually overrode safety protocols to save experimental life support chambers, ensuring that crucial biological samples survived even as their own homes were destroyed. Neighbors who had never spoken helped carry wounded families to the few functional medbays. Humanity's resilience was on display, even as the colony itself was falling apart. As the hours passed, the destruction became near total. Entire districts vanished, replaced by craters and smoke. The alien fleet hovered above the colony like a predator surveying its prey. Despite their best efforts, the people of Haven 12 could not fight back. All they could do was try to survive, help each other, and record what they could. Every transmission, every video, became part of the evidence that would later ignite a response across the galaxy. By nightfall, Haven 12 was unrecognizable. The once bustling streets were empty, except for the occasional survivor moving cautiously. Between the ruins, fires burned in places where homes, labs, and public buildings had stood. The colony's once proud towers were reduced to smoking skeletons. And still, the alien fleet remained, ensuring that no one escaped and that the message was clear. Humans were not welcome in this space. Yet, even in the face of annihilation, hope remained. Small groups of survivors managed to reach hidden shelters, carrying with them whatever food, water, and communication devices they could salvage. They sent desperate messages into the void, praying someone somewhere would hear them. Haven 12 is under attack. One transmission began, trembling but resolute. We are not safe. Please respond. These messages would eventually reach human fleets and command centers light years away. They were fragmented, incomplete, but the courage behind them was unmistakable. Every clip, every message was a testament to the human spirit. Ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances, refusing to surrender even when the world around them was crumbling. By the end of the first day, Haven 12 was essentially gone. Thousands had perished, and countless more were missing. But the colony's survivors, though broken, had done something remarkable. They had left a trail of evidence that would galvanize humanity. Every transmission, every recorded act of bravery, every story of survival was now a beacon to the rest of human civilization. The people of Haven 12 had become the spark for what would later be called humanity's greatest mobilization. And so, as the alien fleet slowly withdrew from orbit, leaving behind only smoke and silence, the people of Haven 12 realized something profound. They were alive. They had survived what should have been impossible. And while they had lost everything, their homes, their friends, their peace, they had left a mark, a record of their courage that would not be ignored. Somewhere far away. In the council chambers of the United Terran Council, leaders were watching the transmissions. They saw not just destruction, but the unmistakable resilience of humans. They saw families helping each other, strangers risking their lives for neighbors, and people refusing to surrender. And in that moment, The Council understood that Haven 12's tragedy would not end with a single attack. It would become the rallying point, the reason humanity would rise as one. The people of Haven 12 did not know it yet, but their story had begun to echo across the stars. Humanity would remember them, and the universe would soon learn that even in the face of annihilation, humans would not bow. The colony might have fallen, but its spirit, the courage, the hope, the determination, would fuel the next chapter in human history. News of the tragedy on Haven 12 traveled across human space faster than anyone could have imagined. For millions of people on distant planets, moons, and space stations, the images were horrifying. Smoldering buildings, terrified families, running through crumbling streets, and the alien fleet that had destroyed everything seemed unreal. Many stared at their screens in disbelief, unable to process what they were seeing. Some cried openly. Others sat in stunned silence. It was hard to imagine that such a peaceful colony could be erased so quickly, and even harder to imagine that this threat could reach other human worlds. On Earth, the reaction was immediate and intense. Government chambers, usually calm and controlled, became chaotic. Leaders and council members argued passionately about the scale of the attack and what should be done next. The first instinct for many was to send a retaliatory strike immediately. But logistics and strategy made it impossible. The alien fleet had disappeared after the initial attack, leaving only ruins and terrified survivors. Still, the question hung in the air everywhere. How could humanity allow something like this to happen again? Families of the fallen and missing citizens began gathering in spaceports, desperately hoping to hear news of their loved ones. Volunteers came from nearby colonies to help evacuate the survivors from Haven 12's neighboring systems. Some of the survivors were in shock, moving like shadows, unable to speak or process what had happened. Others refused to leave, determined to stay near the graves of their homes and friends. Among them were children who had seen their parents die, now carrying the weight of grief far beyond their years. Military commanders began analyzing the footage from Haven 12. Every detail, from the alien ship's formation to the energy weapons they used, was studied carefully. Strategists realized that these attackers were not random pirates or raiders. They were organized, disciplined, and terrifyingly efficient. Their goal was not theft or resource gathering, but complete destruction. For the first time in human history, there was proof that another intelligent species was willing to target humans simply to eliminate them. Meanwhile, scientists and analysts worked tirelessly to gather any information they could from the debris left behind. They studied fragments of destroyed ships, residual energy traces, and even the recordings sent by the survivors. Each piece of evidence revealed the sophistication of the attackers' technology. It was unlike anything humanity had encountered before. And while fear grew across the colonies, there was also determination. Humans have always been resourceful, and they were not about to allow this level of destruction to go unanswered. The media played a major role in shaping public sentiment. News channels broadcast the devastation repeatedly, sometimes showing close-up images of families clinging to each other, of children crying as they were carried through ruined streets. While it was painful to watch, it sparked something powerful: unity. Across human systems, people began talking about what had happened on Haven 12. They shared their anger, their grief, and above all, their desire to protect their species. For the first time in decades, there was a shared sense of purpose that transcended planets, colonies, and stations. In the halls of the United Terran Council, debates raged late into the night. Some argued for diplomacy, hoping that communication with the alien attackers could prevent further destruction. Others believed the only response would be a show of force, a demonstration of humanity's determination to survive. A small group of scientists reminded the Council that the survivors' recordings could serve as evidence in any future negotiations or tribunals. They insisted that humanity needed to act, but act wisely. Despite the tension, one thing became clear: humanity could not remain passive. The tragedy had revealed a weakness, a vulnerability, and the Council understood that other colonies could be next. For decades, human expansion had been focused on exploration, research, and cooperation. Defense had often been secondary. Haven 12's destruction was proof that this approach could no longer continue. Humans would have to prepare to protect themselves with a scale of power they had never imagined. Families who had lost loved ones or homes became part of the larger effort, not out of duty, but out of necessity. People who had worked as engineers, pilots, and medical staff on Haven 12 volunteered to help coordinate relief and reconstruction. They provided first-hand accounts of the attack, describing the movements of the alien fleet and the weapons they used. Their testimony was invaluable, giving the Council a clearer picture of what humanity was facing. At the same time, civilians from other colonies donated supplies, technology, and resources, determined to support the survivors and ensure that the attack would not go unanswered. Meanwhile, the survivors themselves began to adapt. Groups of people huddled together, sharing limited food and water, setting up temporary shelters in safe zones. They formed small councils to organize daily routines, maintain morale, and keep hope alive. Children attended makeshift schools, and adults taught them practical skills for survival. Every day was a struggle, but there was a sense of solidarity that gave people strength. It was not the life they had known, but it was life, and they clung to it with determination. Across human space, scientists worked night and day to develop new defense technologies. Engineers studied alien energy signatures and attempted to replicate or counter them. Military leaders coordinated the fleets, preparing contingency plans in case the attackers returned. Communication lines buzzed constantly with updates from colonies, reports of potential threats, and analysis of the surviving evidence. Every piece of data was carefully cataloged, forming the foundation of humanity's next step. The moral impact of Haven 12's destruction was enormous. People everywhere began to reflect on the fragility of life and the importance of unity. Debates were held in public forums and across media channels about the ethics of human expansion, the need for stronger defense, and the responsibility of protecting every colony. Leaders emphasized that humanity's response would not be driven by hatred or vengeance, but by the desire to safeguard the innocent and ensure survival. This message resonated deeply with people, reinforcing the collective resolve. Even artists and storytellers contributed. They painted murals, wrote songs, and created digital documentaries about Haven 12, portraying the courage of its citizens. These stories celebrated the acts of bravery and kindness amid the chaos. They reminded humanity that even in destruction, human spirit could shine. Each piece of art, each narrative, became part of a larger movement that galvanized society. People were no longer just witnessing a tragedy. They were becoming part of a shared history that would define the human race for generations. As days turned into weeks, the scale of the tragedy became fully clear. Tens of thousands had perished, and countless more were missing or displaced. The survivors struggled to rebuild in makeshift shelters, but they also sent messages beyond their system, detailing the attack, the alien fleet's tactics, and the AI technology they had witnessed. These messages reached council members, military leaders, and scientists, forming the basis for a plan that would soon reshape human history. The United Terran Council, after reviewing all the evidence and survivor reports, made a decision that would mark a turning point. Humanity would not simply mourn Haven 12 and move on. Instead, every effort would be made to prevent such a tragedy from ever happening again. Defense programs were accelerated, fleets were repositioned, and a strategy was developed to ensure that no human colony would ever face annihilation alone. For the first time in centuries, humanity would stand as a single united force, prepared to protect every citizen, no matter where they lived. Even as the council worked, ordinary people felt the change. Communities across the galaxy began to train volunteers, create local defense networks, and strengthen communication systems. Students learned survival tactics, engineers focused on new energy shields, and pilots trained relentlessly. The destruction of Haven 12 had awakened a new awareness. Humanity's survival depended not only on leadership, but on the active participation of every individual. The tragedy also created a bond among people who had never met. Survivors of Haven 12 told their stories to others across colonies, sharing what they had endured. Their experiences created empathy, understanding, and determination. People who had once considered themselves distant or disconnected now realized that they were part of a larger human family, and the survival of one colony depended on the vigilance of all. By the end of the second part of the story, humanity had shifted from shock and despair to a collective sense of purpose. The pain of Haven 12's loss remained raw, but it became the foundation for a new determination. Across the galaxy, humans began to prepare, study, and unite, driven by the memory of those who had suffered and the knowledge that the threat was his. Real. Haven 12's tragedy would no longer be just a story of loss. It would be a call to action, a spark that ignited humanity's readiness to protect itself, even in the face of fear and uncertainty. The survivors' courage inspired millions. Families who had endured loss became leaders in their communities. Children who had seen horror learned resilience and hope. And while the scars of Haven 12 would never disappear, the message was clear. Humanity was awake, united, and ready to defend its own. The events. After the initial shock of Haven 12's destruction, the United Terran Council focused on understanding exactly who had attacked humanity. The images, survivor reports, and intercepted transmissions gave hints, but nothing was complete. Analysts worked around the clock, trying to piece together the identity of the alien fleet. It was unlike anything humans had seen before. Ships moved in perfect formations, weapons discharged with deadly precision, and energy patterns were unfamiliar. Every clue pointed to a species that was not only advanced, but also disciplined and organized. The Council began to refer to them as the Valaric Dominion, based on fragments of intercepted transmissions that hinted at a centralized authority. There was little else known about them. Intelligence teams tried to decode the language patterns, symbols, and data signatures, but progress was slow. Every analyst knew that the survival of human colonies depended on figuring out who these attackers were and what they wanted. Meanwhile, the survivors of Haven 12 were helping in unexpected ways. The stories they shared provided details about the fleet's behavior, the types of weapons used, and the ways civilians had tried to escape. Engineers and scientists used these testimonies to reconstruct the attack in simulations. They discovered that the aliens had attacked deliberately, targeting the colony's infrastructure, communications, and defense systems with precision. This was no random raid. Haven 12 had been singled out, studied, and destroyed intentionally. The Council convened special sessions with military leaders, strategists, and scientists. They studied every detail, every survivor report, every fragment of data from destroyed communication satellites. It became clear that diplomacy alone would not solve the problem. The Valaric Dominion had shown a willingness to kill without warning or negotiation. Their goal seemed to be the assertion of dominance and the eradication of perceived threats. And humanity now understood that ignoring the problem could lead to more tragedies. Like Haven 12, governments across human space began to take action. Emergency defenses were strengthened, communication networks upgraded, and every remaining fleet placed on high alert. Colonies began holding drills and training civilians for emergencies. People learned evacuation procedures, emergency communication codes, and basic survival tactics. The fear from Haven 12 transformed into determination. Humanity could no longer afford to rely on hope alone. It had to rely on preparation and unity. While the scientists and analysts worked on understanding the Valaric Dominion, the military began formulating strategic responses. The first challenge was distance. The colonies closest to Haven 12 were still light years away, meaning that reinforcements could not arrive quickly in the event of another attack. This forced commanders to consider a bold approach, building a rapid response system capable of mobilizing fleets at unprecedented scale. It was a logistical challenge unlike anything humans had faced. The Council also had to consider communication. Attempts to contact the Dominion failed repeatedly. Every message sent through secure channels was ignored or intercepted and scrambled. It became painfully clear that the Dominion did not acknowledge humanity as a legitimate civilization. They were not interested in negotiation, cooperation, or diplomacy. Their actions had been deliberate, and their silence was confirmation that they saw humans as inferior or unworthy. Amid the planning and analysis, the survivors' experiences were studied in detail. Civilians who had witnessed the attack provided insight into the Dominion's tactics. Some recalled that the aliens had scanned buildings before firing, choosing targets in a way that minimized waste but maximized destruction. Others remembered the energy weapons leaving lasting effects on the environment, something human scientists had never seen before. Every account painted a picture of a species that was methodical, relentless, and terrifyingly intelligent. Moral implications of this realization weighed heavily on humanity. The destruction of Haven 12 was not just an attack on a single colony, it was a warning. Humanity understood that if it failed to act, other colonies could face the same fate. Leaders began to emphasize that their response must be calculated, precise, and overwhelming to prevent further loss of life. This sense of responsibility fueled every decision, from fleet positioning to the acceleration of technological research. As intelligence reports accumulated, patterns in the Dominions' behavior became apparent. They operated as a unified command, responding quickly to any perceived threat with overwhelming force. They targeted settlements that were isolated or less defended, suggesting they had studied human expansion closely. This discovery shocked humanity. For decades, humans had believed that distant colonies were safe and protected by distance alone. Haven 12 proved that distance no longer guaranteed security. In response, the Council made a controversial decision. Humanity would need to build and mobilize a force capable of confronting the Dominion directly. They called it Protocol Titanfall, a plan to gather every available warship, defense fleet, and reserve vessel into a single coordinated armada. The scale was unimaginable. For the first time in history, humans were preparing to assemble a fleet so large that it could rival an entire civilization's military. The Council knew it would be a message, not just to the Dominion, but to the galaxy. Humanity would no longer be passive in the face of annihilation. At the same time, civilians and engineers worked to adapt technologies salvaged from Haven 12 and nearby colonies. Attempts were made to reverse engineer Dominion energy signatures, hoping to develop defensive shields or countermeasures. Laboratories hummed with activity day and night. Volunteers from across colonies joined in, motivated by grief, fear, and a desire to protect humanity's future. Every effort, no matter how small, contributed to the larger goal. Survival. As the preparations continued, the media played a crucial role. News channels broadcast updates about the scale of the threat, the progress of the simulations, and the unity of human colonies. While some feared panic, many found hope in the collective effort. Families who had lost loved ones, saw that the tragedy of Haven 12 was not being forgotten. Communities far from the attack began to feel part of a larger mission. Humanity was waking up, and that awakening was spreading fast. Even ordinary citizens became part of the story. Farmers, miners, teachers, and engineers took part in local defense projects, created emergency plans, and volunteered for fleet training programs. Their contributions were vital, proving that in times of crisis, every individual mattered. The tragedy had revealed the vulnerability of humans, but it also revealed the strength that came from unity. Military strategists worked tirelessly to map potential attack routes, predict Dominion movements, and plan defensive strategies. Simulations were run continuously, testing every scenario, from small fleet skirmishes to full-scale assaults on major colonies. Each simulation was informed by the survivor accounts from Haven 12, ensuring that lessons learned would guide future action. Commanders understood that the stakes were not just strategic, they were personal. Each lost ship or crew member represented human lives, families, and communities. Ethics and morality were central to these discussions. While humans prepared for a massive response, leaders insisted that the goal was not revenge, but protection. Humanity would act decisively, but it would not become the kind of aggressor that had destroyed Haven 12. Every plan emphasized minimizing loss of civilian life, protecting colonies, and demonstrating that human strength could coexist with responsibility. This approach reinforced the idea that even in times of crisis, humanity's values would guide its actions. As days turned into weeks, the identity of the Valaric Dominion became clearer. Analysts discovered that the Dominion civilization had expanded across multiple star systems, claiming territory and resources with little regard for other species. Their culture appeared rigid, hierarchical, and militant. They did not negotiate, they did not compromise, and they considered diplomacy a weakness. Humanity realized that if it wanted to ensure safety, it could not rely on conversation or compromise alone. It would need to stand as a united force, ready to defend itself across every system. In the midst of all this, the survivors of Haven 12 became symbols. Their courage, their survival, and their willingness to share knowledge inspired millions. People across human space followed their stories closely. Children listened to accounts of bravery. Adults shared them in homes and workplaces, and communities held memorials and vigils. Haven 12 citizens were no longer just victims. They were leaders in the fight to protect humanity. Their experience became the blueprint for training, preparation, and resilience. By the end of this period, humanity had transformed. From a civilization focused on expansion and exploration, humans had become vigilant, organized, and united. Every colony, every fleet, and every citizen was aware of the threat. While fear lingered, determination dominated. Humanity now had a clear enemy, a deep understanding of its capabilities, and a plan to ensure that what happened to Haven 12 would never happen again. The stage was set for a historic response. The Valaric Dominion had revealed itself as a deadly threat, but humanity had learned crucial lessons. Every report, every survivor account, and every piece of technology would be used to build a defense strong enough to protect the species. What had started? The decision to mobilize humanity's entire fleet was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. For centuries, fleets had been scattered across colonies, assigned to exploration, trade, or local defense. Now, for the first time, every available warship, carrier, cruiser, and fighter would gather under a single command. Scientists, engineers, pilots, and civilians all realized that the survival of humanity depended on their efforts. What had started as a distant tragedy on Haven 12 had become the catalyst for a historic awakening. Command centers across human space buzzed with activity day and night. Orders were sent to every fleet, every shipyard, and every reserve squadron. Engineers worked tirelessly, repairing old vessels and preparing them for long journeys. Pilots trained in simulation rooms, practicing maneuvers they had never attempted before. For many, it was not just about duty, it was personal. The images of Haven 12's destruction were burned into their memories. They were fighting for their families, for their friends, and for the memory of those who had been lost. Communication networks lit up with messages from every corner of human space. Colonists volunteered supplies, technicians, and labor, assisting in ways they could. Even civilians who had never been near a shipyard found ways to contribute, from coding emergency systems to fabricating parts in local workshops. The sense of purpose was universal. People understood that this was no ordinary mission. Humanity was preparing to show the galaxy that it would not be pushed aside, destroyed, or ignored. The fleets began moving toward designated assembly points. Star systems that had been quiet for years now teemed with activity. Ships of every size and shape emerged from slipspace, converging on locations chosen for strategic advantage. Massive carriers glided alongside sleek interceptors. Transport vessels carried crucial supplies, and orbital stations became temporary command hubs. The scale of the operation was unprecedented. For the first time in history, humans were demonstrating that they could act as a single, coordinated force across light years of space. As the fleets gathered, crews experienced a mixture of awe and tension. Many had never seen such a concentration of human technology. Some pilots whispered in disbelief as enormous battleships moved past them, their hulls bristling with weapons and shield generators. Engineers marveled at the complexity of the coordination, knowing that every connection, every calculation, and every command had to be perfect. One small mistake could cause chaos in a formation of hundreds of thousands of vessels. The responsibility weighed heavily on everyone. Commanders held daily briefings to keep morale high and maintain order. They reminded crews that while the fleet's size was intimidating, the Dominion had also shown themselves to be ruthless and intelligent. Humanity could not underestimate them. Simulations were run constantly, testing strategies, defensive formations, and emergency protocols. Every crew member, from pilots to support teams, learned their role in precise detail. The human response was no longer reactive. It was deliberate, organized, and disciplined. In addition to the fleets themselves, civilians played a crucial role. In the preparation, communication networks ensured that colonies far from the assembly points could contribute intelligence, supplies, and backup support. Every individual understood that their actions mattered. Families sent messages of encouragement to crews. Engineers worked tirelessly to fabricate replacement parts, and volunteers assisted in mapping safe routes for fleet movement. The tragedy of Haven 12 had united humanity in a way that nothing else ever could. As the Armada continued to assemble, the scale became almost unimaginable. Star systems filled with ships, stretching across light years, forming a network of human power. It was calculated that over 500,000 warships would be part of the mobilization, including every active vessel, reserve ship, and modified civilian craft capable of joining the fleet. The enormity of the task required extraordinary coordination. Slipspace lanes were carefully scheduled to prevent collisions. Fuel depots were strategically placed. Supply chains extended across dozens of colonies. Every detail had to be precise. Despite the preparation, there was still uncertainty. No one knew exactly how the Dominion would react. Would they attack again? Would they attempt to evade humanity's fleet? Or would they see the mobilization as an act of war? Every commander, every officer, and every crew member understood that they were entering unknown territory. Yet the fear did not paralyze them. It fueled them. It reminded them why they were here, to prevent another Haven 12, to protect every human colony, and to ensure that no one would ever underestimate humanity again. During this time, the stories of Haven 12 continued to inspire the fleet. Every ship carried messages from survivors, videos of courage, and records of the attack. Pilots and engineers watched the clips of ordinary civilians saving each other, families helping strangers, and communities refusing to give up. These stories were shared across the Armada, reminding every human why the mobilization was necessary. It was not just a military mission, it was personal, emotional, and deeply human. As the days passed, the fleet's movement became more synchronized. Ships practiced formations, simulated attacks, and coordinated their defenses. Communication channels carried continuous updates, ensuring that every vessel was aware of the other's positions. Even small teams on supply ships or repair vessels understood that their role was critical. Every task, no matter how minor it seemed, contributed to the strength and cohesion of the human armada. The human spirit shone through in unexpected ways. Crew members composed songs, shared stories, and held small ceremonies to honor those lost on Haven 12. Messages from families back home encouraged the crews, reminding them that humanity was watching, supporting, and depending on them. Children wrote letters to the pilots and engineers, thanking them for protecting the future of human colonies. These gestures strengthened morale and reminded everyone that they were fighting for something larger than themselves. Scientists continued to work alongside the fleet, monitoring energy signatures, scanning for Dominion activity, and analyzing any anomalies in nearby systems. Engineers adapted older vessels with new defensive technologies, installing shields, countermeasures, and rapid repair systems. Medical teams trained for large-scale emergencies, preparing to respond to potential casualties. Every human involved understood that their efforts were part of a larger, coordinated mission. By the time the fleet was fully assembled, the Armada stretched across several light years. The scale was awe-inspiring. Massive battleships towered over smaller crafts. Carriers launched swarms of fighter drones, while support ships ensured that fuel, repairs, and supplies were constantly available. Commanders held final briefings, ensuring that every crew member understood their role, their objective, and the stakes involved. It was clear that the Dominion had never faced a response of this magnitude. Humanity was no longer scattered and vulnerable. Humanity was united, powerful, and ready. Even as the Armada prepared to move toward Dominion space, there was a moment of reflection. For all the technology, the strategy, and the preparation, it was still humans, ordinary people, who made the difference. Families, engineers, scientists, pilots, and even volunteers who had never seen combat were all part of the same mission. The tragedy of Haven 12 had reminded humanity that survival required courage, ingenuity, and unity. It was not just machines or weapons that would determine the outcome. It was the human spirit. As the fleets began to jump toward the edges of Dominion-controlled space, silence fell across the Armada. For a moment, every human on board understood the gravity of what was happening. They were about to confront an enemy that had already shown the capacity for destruction. But they were not just fighting for themselves. They were fighting for every colony, every life, and every human who had ever dreamed of peace. The Armada's movement was more than military action. It was a statement, a message to the galaxy. Humanity would not be destroyed, ignored, or silenced. Even the Dominion, watching from afar, began to sense the scale of the response. Scouts reported the massing of human warships, the synchronization of fleets, and the preparation for engagement. For the first time, the aliens saw that humans were not simply survivors. They were a civilization capable of unprecedented coordination and determination. The Armada was no longer a reaction. It was a force to be reckoned with. Within the Armada, the crews felt a mix of fear, determination, and pride. They knew that the next steps would be dangerous. They understood that some might not return. But there was also hope that their preparation, their unity, and their courage would prevent another tragedy. The story of Haven 12 would not end in despair. Humanity was ready to protect its own, and this mobilization was proof that nothing could break their resolve. As the Armada jumped closer to Dominion space, the fleets maintained tight formations, shields ready, weapons armed, and every crew member vigilant. Every action, every decision, and every maneuver was carefully coordinated. Humanity had learned from Haven 12, and now it was time to demonstrate that humans would not be passive victims. They would act, they would defend, and they would ensure that no colony would ever fall again without a fight. The mobilization of 500,000 warships was more than military might. It was a testament to human resilience, ingenuity, and the Armada moved through space with quiet determination. For weeks, fleets had gathered, repaired, and trained, and now all 500,000 warships were advancing toward the edges of Dominion-controlled systems. The scale of the mobilization was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Ships of every class glided in tight formations, their engines humming with power. Massive carriers flew alongside sleek interceptors, and support vessels stretched the Armada across millions of kilometers. From the observation decks of even the smallest craft, it was impossible not to feel the weight of history in motion. Inside the command ships, officers and pilots worked tirelessly. Every sensor, every communication channel, and every navigational system was monitored constantly. The Dominion's territory was unfamiliar, filled with unknown hazards, gravitational anomalies, and uncharted paths. Even experienced navigators paused as they scanned the region. It was not just the enemy that was unpredictable. Space itself could be treacherous. Despite the tension, humans felt a sense of purpose that pushed them forward. They were not just fighting for themselves. They were defending every colony, every life, and every future generation. As the fleet approached Dominion space, the first signs of the enemy became visible. Scouts reported vessels observing the human armada from distant orbits. They were smaller ships at first, moving cautiously, almost curious, as if trying to understand the scale of the human mobilization. Analysts on the human command ships studied the scouts carefully. Every movement, every sensor reading, and every energy signature was cataloged. The Dominion had not expected humans to assemble such a fleet. This was their first real warning. Humanity was serious, united, and ready to defend itself. Meanwhile, across the Armada, crews were feeling a mix of emotions. Some were anxious, remembering the destruction of Haven 12 and fearing a similar fate. Others were resolute, fueled by memories of loss and determination to protect the innocent. Families of the lost and the survivors of Haven 12 had sent personal messages urging the crews to be strong, stay vigilant, and act with courage. These messages were shared widely across the fleet, and they served as reminders of why every human on board was here. They were not fighting for glory. They were fighting for life, for family, and for humanity itself. Military leaders took special care to explain the mission to all personnel. Humanity was not seeking war, they said, but it would not bow to destruction. Every maneuver, every fleet formation, and every communication was designed to send a clear message. Humans were united, prepared, and capable of defending themselves. Commanders emphasized that the goal was to prevent further attacks, to demonstrate strength, and to protect all colonies, not to provoke unnecessary conflict. This approach reassured many in the Armada, reminding them that their actions were guided by strategy and morality, not anger alone. As the Armada advanced, the first encounters with Dominion forces began. At first, they were cautious and probing, sending small groups of ships to test the fleet's responses. Human pilots engaged in careful maneuvers, showing defensive strength without initiating attacks. Communications channels broadcast warnings, explaining humanity's intentions. They were prepared to defend themselves, but they were not seeking unnecessary bloodshed. The Dominion vessels, after observing the fleet's coordination and overwhelming size, hesitated. They had underestimated human capability and now faced a civilization they had not anticipated. Across the Armada, crews watched the first interactions with the Dominion fleet carefully. The pilots maintained strict formation, avoiding rash engagement. While demonstrating readiness, engineers ensured that weapon systems were online and shields fully charged. Medical teams remained on high alert, preparing for any possible casualties. Even support staff, who had never been near combat, felt the weight of responsibility. Every human understood that this was not just a test. It was the moment humanity would show its resolve to the galaxy. The Armada's movement became a slow, deliberate march. Large carriers launched reconnaissance drones, scanning Dominion territory, while smaller interceptor teams maintained rapid response readiness. Analysts compared every movement of Dominion vessels with simulations created from survivor reports and intelligence data. Each piece of information was used to anticipate the enemy's next step. The Dominion realized quickly that humans were not only strong but intelligent in their tactics, capable of rapid adaptation and careful planning. For those aboard the ships, the experience was surreal. Hundreds of thousands of vessels moved in perfect synchronization, each crew member aware of their role and responsibility. Pilots communicated constantly, sharing observations and coordinating maneuvers. Engineers monitored energy outputs, shield, integrity, and weapon readiness. Everyone had become part of something far larger than themselves. The tragedy of Haven 12 had taught humans that unity and preparation were as important as courage and strength, and this operation demonstrated it clearly. Civilians played their part too. Across colonies, people monitored communications, relayed intelligence, and maintained supply chains. Communities far from the front lines understood that their work mattered. Food, fuel, medical supplies, and technical components were all critical to keeping the Armada operational. Ordinary humans who had once felt powerless now contributed to the survival and defense of their species. Every effort, no matter how small, helped reinforce the strength of humanity's united front. As the fleet entered the outer edges of Dominion territory, tension grew. Every sensor was scanned repeatedly, every signal analyzed. The Dominion had territory spanning multiple star systems, with potential hazards hidden in orbital belts, asteroid fields, and energy anomalies. Human navigators calculated routes with extreme precision, ensuring that ships moved safely while maintaining tactical advantage. Even the smallest miscalculation could cause chaos in a fleet of this size. Yet despite the immense pressure, humans moved forward with determination and care, demonstrating a combination of courage and discipline that had never been seen before. The first signs of full Dominion response appeared in distant star systems. Larger fleets began to mobilize, attempting to block the human advance. Commanders remained calm, emphasizing that engagement would only occur if necessary. The Armada's size alone, however, sent a powerful message. Dominion ships observed, humans moving in perfect formation, shield systems fully operational, and weapon arrays online. For the first time, the aliens realized that humans were capable of rapid mobilization, precise coordination, and unwavering determination. They had underestimated humanity's ability to unite in the face of danger. Within the Armada, morale remained high despite the tension. Messages from families, survivors, and communities reinforced the sense of purpose. Crew members reminded each other of the sacrifices made on Haven 12, the courage of ordinary citizens, and the importance of protecting every human colony. Even those who had once doubted humanity's capacity to respond now felt pride and confidence. The Armada was more than a fleet. It was a symbol of collective resilience, courage, and determination. As the human fleet advanced further into Dominion space, commanders carefully coordinated signals and maneuvers. Reconnaissance drones provided continuous updates, while communication networks allowed every ship to remain synchronized. Engineers worked tirelessly to maintain shield strength and energy efficiency. Medical teams prepared for potential emergencies, and pilots practiced rapid response drills. Every human on board understood the stakes. The Dominion had already proven capable of destruction, but humanity was ready, united, and determined. The first real confrontation came not as a battle, but as a tense standoff. Dominion vessels observed humans moving with precision and strength. Humans broadcast messages, emphasizing that they sought only defense and protection, not conquest. The Dominion hesitated. For the first time, they realized that humans were not just reactive, disorganized colonists. They were a civilization capable of unparalleled coordination and resilience. Their confidence faltered as they understood the scale and seriousness of the human mobilization. Even in the silence of space, the human spirit was visible. Crews communicated with one another, shared encouragement, and reminded each other why they were there. Pilots watched screens displaying reconnaissance data, engineers calibrated energy systems, and every human involved recognized the gravity of the moment. Haven 12's tragedy had forged a unity and resolve that no alien fleet could ignore. Humanity was no longer scattered or vulnerable. It was a coordinated, disciplined force, ready to defend its people at any cost. As the Armada continued to advance, the Dominion's hesitation grew. Smaller ships retreated, while larger vessels moved cautiously to monitor the human movement. The human fleet maintained its formation, demonstrating discipline and readiness. Every maneuver was calculated to show strength while minimizing the risk of unnecessary engagement. Humanity's message was clear. It would not bow, it would not flee, and it would protect its own with unwavering determination. Across the fleet, humans reflected on how far they had come since Haven 12, from shock and grief to preparation, mobilization, and now confrontation. They had transformed. Civilians had contributed, engineers had adapted, pilots had trained, and survivors had shared critical knowledge. The human armada had reached the heart of Dominion territory, and the scale of the operation was breathtaking. For weeks, fleets had moved in perfect formation across light years, every ship, crew, and officer aware of the stakes. The human mobilization was no longer just a show of force. It was a statement, a declaration that humanity would no longer be passive, vulnerable, or underestimated. Every individual on board, from pilots to engineers, felt the weight of history pressing upon them. They were about to change the balance of power in the galaxy. As the Armada moved closer to the Dominion's primary systems. Sensors picked up larger, more organized fleets preparing to intercept them. The Dominion was no longer hesitant. They had recognized humanity as a significant force, one they could not ignore. Commanders across the human armada prepared for what might be the first real battle, but even as tension filled the decks of every ship, leaders reminded crews of their mission: defend, protect, and demonstrate strength, not seek unnecessary bloodshed. Every maneuver had to be precise, every response measured. For the first time, humanity and the Dominion faced each other across space in a way that left no room for doubt. Communications were attempted, and humans broadcast messages declaring their intent. They sought to protect their colonies and prevent further attacks, but they were prepared to defend themselves at any cost. There was a long pause before the Dominion responded, and when they did, it was clear they had underestimated human resilience. Their message was cautious, testing the resolve of the Armada while seeking to gauge humanity's willingness to act decisively. Inside the Armada, crews felt the tension build. Pilots sat in their cockpits, hands steady but hearts racing. Engineers monitored shields, energy output, and weapon systems. Command officers coordinated thousands of ships simultaneously, making sure every formation was perfect. The events of Haven 12 were still fresh in everyone's minds, a stark reminder of what was at stake. Every person understood that failure was not an option. Humanity had learned from loss, and now it was prepared to act with precision, unity, and courage. The Dominion fleets moved cautiously at first, testing the human formations, scanning for weaknesses, and probing the Armada's defenses. Human commanders responded with careful coordination, demonstrating their ability to defend themselves without initiating unnecessary conflict. The scale of the Armada alone was overwhelming. Millions of sensors, shields, and weapon systems acted as a single entity, and every Dominion vessel that observed the formation realized the humans were no longer vulnerable or unprepared. Within the human Armada, stories of Haven 12 continued to inspire crews. Survivors' accounts of bravery, courage, and resilience were shared in every ship. Messages from families, children, and communities reminded crews why they were fighting. Engineers worked tirelessly, knowing that every repair, every adjustment, and every innovation contributed directly to humanity's survival. Pilots reminded each other of the stakes, and medical teams prepared for the possibility of casualties. Humanity had transformed tragedy into purpose, fear into unity, and grief into determination. As tension grew, the first small skirmishes occurred. Dominion scouts attempted to test human defenses, but they were met with precise coordination, rapid response maneuvers, and careful restraint. No human vessel acted recklessly. Pilots engaged in defensive maneuvers, interceptors protected carriers, and long-range systems tracked the movements of every Dominion ship. The aliens realized that humans had learned quickly from past mistakes. Every attempt to test the Armada was met with disciplined, organized, and overwhelming response. Humanity had shown that it was capable not only of survival, but of mastery. Over its own forces, across the fleets, communication lines buzzed constantly. Commanders relayed orders, pilots shared observations, and engineers reported system status updates. Even the smallest support crews understood the significance of their work. They maintained power systems, repaired shields, and ensured that medical teams were ready for emergencies. The entire Armada functioned as a single organism, each individual contributing to the collective strength. It was a testament to human ingenuity, discipline, and resilience. As the skirmishes escalated, Dominion commanders realized that continuing aggression could be disastrous. Every engagement they attempted was countered with precision. Human tactics were adaptive, learning quickly from each movement of the alien vessels. It became clear that humanity was no longer disorganized, reactive, or easily intimidated. The Dominion had faced humans before in minor conflicts, but they had never seen coordination and unity on this scale. The balance of power had shifted. With this realization, a surprising move occurred. Dominion leadership attempted direct communication with the human Armada, requesting a parley. They acknowledged humanity's strength, organization, and ability to defend itself. Their message was cautious but respectful, admitting that the previous attack on Haven 12 had underestimated the resilience and unity of human civilization. For the first time, humans had forced the Dominion to reconsider their actions. Commanders in the human Armada deliberated quickly. The Council's orders were clear: protect humanity, prevent further destruction, and demonstrate strength, but avoid unnecessary bloodshed. After consultation, a controlled and strategic meeting was arranged through secure channels. Human representatives, accompanied by neutral communications experts, prepared for the first face-to-face negotiation across species boundaries. It was a delicate balance of authority, caution, and confidence that, as negotiations began, humans demonstrated both strength and restraint. They presented evidence of the Dominion's attack on Haven 12, detailing the destruction and the lives lost. At the same time, they made it clear that humanity was prepared to defend itself and would not allow further attacks. The Dominion listened carefully, their initial confidence replaced by caution. They had expected humans to be vulnerable, fragmented, and reactive. Instead, they encountered a civilization that had transformed tragedy into unity, loss into preparation, and fear into coordinated determination. Across the Armada, crew members watched the outcome with anticipation. Pilots maintained readiness, engineers monitored every system, and medical teams stayed alert. Every human understood that this moment could determine the future of their species. Yet, despite the tension, there was hope. For the first time, the possibility existed that humanity could avoid further conflict without compromising its safety. The Armada's presence alone had sent a powerful message. Humans were no longer a passive civilization to be underestimated. The negotiations proved effective. The Dominion, recognizing the overwhelming scale and unity of humanity, agreed to cease further attacks on human colonies. They acknowledged human territory and the necessity of respect for other civilizations. It was not an act of surrender, in the traditional sense, but a recognition of humanity's strength, preparedness, and unwavering resolve. For centuries, humans had faced threats with hope, courage, and resilience. But now the galaxy had witnessed their ability to unify on an unprecedented scale. Within the human armada, the response was a mixture of relief and quiet celebration. Crews maintained readiness while acknowledging the historic achievement. Engineers repaired minor damage from the earlier skirmishes. Pilots shared stories of careful maneuvers, and medical teams treated minor injuries. Yet, the true victory was deeper than physical success. It was moral, strategic, and symbolic. Humanity had shown that courage, preparation, and unity could protect millions, prevent unnecessary bloodshed, and earn respect across the galaxy. Even the survivors of Haven 12 felt a sense of closure. Their accounts, bravery, and determination had played a direct role in reshaping human strategy and ensuring the safety of future colonies. Communities across human space celebrated quietly, understanding that their efforts, memories, and resilience had contributed to a turning point in history. Humanity had not only survived the threat, it had demonstrated its capacity to rise from tragedy stronger than ever. As humans returned to their colonies, fleets remained vigilant, ensuring that peace was maintained. Defense systems were strengthened, communication networks improved, and training programs continued. The lessons of Haven 12 and the confrontation with the Dominion were studied and incorporated into every aspect of human life. Humanity had learned that survival depended on unity, preparedness, and the ability to adapt. Ordinary people, working together across colonies, had created a civilization capable of unprecedented strength. Artists, storytellers, and historians began to record the events in real time. The story of the human armada, the courage of pilots and engineers, and the perseverance of civilians became central narratives for generations to come. Children learned about the tragedy of Haven 12, the unity of the armada, and the first confrontation with the Dominion as lessons in resilience, courage, and the importance of protecting one another. Humanity's history had shifted. While the galaxy was vast, dangerous, and unpredictable, humans had discovered something more important than territory or technology. They had discovered the strength of collective resolve, the tragedy of one colony had sparked the rise of an entire civilization, united under a single cause: the protection of life, the preservation of freedom, and the demonstration that humanity